And we should put every member of Congress on record. They can stand up for the oil companies, or they can stand up for the American people and this new energy
On this
fuel.
vote, the yeas are 164, the nays are 245. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report 112-409 by the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, on which the proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed in voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report Number 112-409, offered by Mr. Ellison of Minnesota.
Recorded vote's been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote rise and be counted as sufficient number. Having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
It's the second of 4 amendment votes to a bill that makes capital formation easier for startup companies, for new companies. An amendment proposed by Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota, which would strike from the bill exemptions for emerging growth companies to comply with requirements of having shareholders approve executive compensation and compensation for retirement executives. 2 more amendment votes to follow. Both of those will be 2-minute votes.
On this vote, the yeas are 169, the nays are 244. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 6, printed in the House Report 112-409 by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 6, printed in House Report Number 112-409, offered by Ms. Waters of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote rise to be counted. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Maxine Waters' amendment deals with initial public offerings, IPOs. The underlying bill is designed to improve access to capital formation for startup businesses, startup companies. It's a 2-minute vote on this amendment, one more amendment vote to follow, and then the House will continue debate on the legislation, at least on amendments, and finish it up tomorrow morning. The House is in at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. About this bill, Jonathan Weissman with the New York Times wrote this morning that on Tuesday, the White House released an official statement of administration policy urging House passage of the Republican bill. He writes it's a rarity from the White House that more often threatens to veto legislation pending before the House. The nays are 258.
Ms. Clark of New York. Clark of New York votes aye. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes aye. Ms. Roybal Allard. Ms. Roybal Allard votes aye. Mr. Crowley. Off aye on no for Mr. Crowley. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Braley of Iowa. Mr. Braley of Iowa votes aye.
The yeas are 161, the nays are 259. The motion is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 9 printed in the House report by 112-409 by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevail by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 9 printed in House report number 112-409 offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
Recorded votes been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise to be counted. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Jerry Connolly of Virginia with an amendment that calls for a study on the effect of speculation on domestic oil and gasoline prices on emerging growth companies. Another 2-minute vote. More amendments to be debated. The bill includes the Capital Expansion Act, which would increase the number of shareholders able to invest in a community bank from 500 to 2,000. And it was about that portion of the bill that caused a disagreement between Texas Representative Jeb Hensarling and Massachusetts Representative Barney Frank. Peter Kasperowicz of the Hill writes, the two members fought over a bill from Ben Quayle of Arizona, H.R. 4088, which was introduced recently and was inserted into the larger capital formation bill. That's the underlying bill they've been debating. But he writes, Barney Frank said Quayle's bill is essentially legislation that Representatives Dave Schweikert of Arizona and Jim Himes of Connecticut, both Democrats, were pursuing, and he accused GOP leaders of giving credit to Quayle. That caused, to the end of those comments, caused Jeb Hensarling to request from the chair that Barney Frank's words be stricken from the record, be taken down, and after 15 to 20 minutes of consideration, they were indeed stricken from the record. And part of the House rules is when that happens, when words are taken down, the member whose words are taken down cannot speak on the House floor for the remainder of that legislative day.
On this vote, the yeas are 185, the nays are 236. The motion is not agreed to. For what purpose is the motion? Gentleman from Texas, rise.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise.
Question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman. Or we didn't finish. The chairman of the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 3606 and has come to no resolution thereon. The House will be in order. Would ask members to please clear the well. That's better. That's better. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection. The chair lays before the House an enrolled bill.
H.R. 4105, an act to apply the countervailing duty provisions of the Tariff Act of 1930 to non-market economy countries and for other purposes.
Would ask for order in the House. Would members please clear the well? The chair would entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does gentleman from Arkansas rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor of Arkansas Children's Hospital which is celebrating 100 years of service to Arkansas's children and families. Since it was founded in 1912 as an orphanage,
House will be in order.
Since it was founded in 1912 as an orphanage, Children's has grown to become one of the largest pediatric hospitals in the nation. Children's is the only Level 1 pediatric trauma center in Arkansas, and they provide care to all 75 counties. For the past 3 years, it's been included in Fortune's 100 Best Places to Work. Medical breakthroughs, intense treatments, unique surgical procedures, and forward thinking have led to Children's international reputation. This is due to Children's more than 4,000 employees. I congratulate Arkansas's Children's Hospital on their contribution to the health and well-being of our children and families and to Arkansas's economy. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purposes, gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we do here in Congress every time that gas prices rise, members from both sides of the aisle are quick to blame each other. The reasons we find ourselves with high gas prices today aren't simple, and we should be wary of anybody that's offering an overly simple one-stop solution to this crisis. Now, we can take some steps to try to calm these prices today, but the real fixes are going to take years, and a willingness to lower the partisan rhetoric around this issue is going to be part of the equation. One thing we can do now in the short term is to make sure that our commodities markets are functioning rationally. That means empowering federal regulators to ensure that oil prices can't be driven simply by financial speculation. We need a Commodities Future Trading Commission to enforce strong trading limits to police speculation in energy markets, and we here in Congress have to give them the resources they need to do that. The problem we face today isn't one of supply and demand. Demand is at its lowest in 17 years. Supply is at its highest in 3 years. This is a question of making sure that speculation isn't running the price up too fast and too quick. It's our job to put some speed bumps along the road.
For what purposes, gentleman from Arkansas rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As of today, the price for a gallon of regular gasoline in my hometown of Jonesboro, Arkansas is $3.55. Just a year ago, that same gallon of regular gasoline would have cost $2.96. We've all heard the news reports that gas could hit a record $5 a gallon this summer. The rising cost of gas not only affects my constituents at the pump, it also drives up the cost of goods and services. Congress can lower gas prices. We can require approval of the Keystone XL pipeline within 30 days. President Obama's rejection of the Keystone project will hit working families at the pump this summer. The American West is primed for oil shale development to provide oil and natural gas. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates we have the equivalent of more than 1.5 trillion barrels of oil in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. That's enough to provide the United States with energy for 200 years. The Obama administration recently announced plans to restrict offshore drilling. After the BP oil spill, strict regulations were put in place to allow for safe, responsible drilling. Now we need the Obama administration to lift the ban on drilling. We are blessed to live in a land with abundant natural resources. We need a federal government that will get out of the way so that we can develop those resources. Not only will these projects help American families meet our energy needs, they'll also help create thousands of jobs in the process. Thank you. Yield back.
For what purposes, gentlelady from Florida rise?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the achievements of Captain Robert C. Grant, who has dedicated his life to serving our nation and protecting the residents of South Florida. Captain Grant is retiring after a distinguished career with the United States Coast Guard Reserve, where he served as the Deputy Chief of Staff of the 7th Coast Guard District. His selfless work has included providing support to Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, assisting in relief efforts after the devastating 2010 earthquake in Haiti, and building strong bonds between the Coast Guard and the Cuban and Haitian communities of South Florida through dedicated public outreach. In his capacity as a congressional liaison, he was instrumental in this body's work on combating maritime smuggling and other threats. He has received numerous military awards and unit citations, and is capping a career that has also included service in the United States Air Force Reserve and the United States Treasury Department. On a personal note, I can't thank Captain Grant enough for his friendship over the years. I know I speak for my staff as well as the greater South Florida community when I say, Captain Grant, we are all so proud of your career, your accomplishments, and you will be sorely missed. Thank you for your service. I yield back the balance of my time.
Are there further requests for 1-minute speeches? The Chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Davis of Illinois for today after 4 p.m. and the balance of the week, Ms. Moore of Wisconsin for today and the balance of the week.
Without objection, the request is granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
And I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, here we are 5 weeks from the time that we all have to file our income taxes, April 17th this year. It's 99 years since this House enacted the progressive income tax that we now all know by its familiar names that we all use for it. And I thought it might be appropriate to spend some time this evening talking about our tax code and talking about what might be possible in fundamental reform of the tax code. I have long been a proponent of what is known as a flat tax. I think that is something that is worthy of this House taking up and debating. There is legislation that has been introduced, H.R. 1040, for people who are keeping score at home. And I think this would be a rational approach for people who want to be treated fairly by the tax code. Our President does talk about fairness in the tax code. And for people who are wanting to get out of the tyranny of having to live with a shoebox full of receipts every spring, because I know this weekend when I go home, I'm going to be spending some time with that shoebox of receipts. The flat tax is an idea that was promulgated by my predecessor here in this House, the former Majority Leader Dick Armey. He wrote a book about the flat tax in 1995. I read it, I embraced it, I thought it was some of the smartest economic policy I had ever read, because I had just lived through what I described as the Clinton paradox. In 1993, President Bill Clinton, in his first year of office, earned almost an identical amount of money that I earned in my medical practice back in Texas. Now, when the taxes were filed and the reports were given on how much Mr. Clinton had paid that year, he returned about 20% of his income in the taxes that he paid. We had earned an identical amount. When I did the same calculation on myself, it was 32%. Why should two people who had an identical earning level pay vastly different amounts on their income tax? The fundamental unfairness of the system as it existed, better accountant, just simply differences in math, why should it account for that type of discrepancy? So this is a concept that I came to Congress and wanted to push. I have been anxious for this Congress to enter into the debate on fundamental tax reform. I am somewhat encouraged during the presidential debates that we've heard over the past several months that presidential candidates have been talking about fundamental tax reform, and the President himself has mentioned creating increased fairness in the tax code. I'm all for that, and I think that this is one way that this House could entertain at least having the debate and perhaps provide a way forward for a more sensible structuring of the payment of income taxes in this country. I'm so very happy tonight to be joined by another member. Alan West of Florida has agreed to speak with us during this hour and share with us his thoughts on fundamental tax reform, and I will recognize for such time as he may consume the gentleman from Florida, Mr. West.
Well, thank you, my dear colleague, Dr. Burgess of Texas, for allowing me to be here and talk about this reform of our tax code. You know, when you sit back and you look at the progressive tax code system that we have here in the United States of America, we hear a lot of talk today about fairness and fair share and economic equality and shared sacrifice. But one of the things we have to come to understand, when you look at the top 1% of wage earners in the United States of America, they're paying close to 40% of the federal income taxes. When you consider the top 5% of wage earners in the United States of America, they're paying close to 58% of those federal income taxes. The top 25% of wage earners in the United States of America pay 86% of the federal income taxes. But of course now we're coming to understand that you have a large percentage of Americans, some say it's between 47 to 49%, that are paying absolutely nothing in federal income taxes. And it kind of reminds me, my dear colleague, of that movie Ben-Hur, when Judah Ben-Hur was sent off to be on the Roman galleys. And of course the commander came down and he said very simply, row well and live 41. And of course we remember that beating. Ba, da, 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 da. Well, what happens on that Roman galley if only 25% is rowing? That's the situation that we have here in the United States of America. You will never get to ramming speed. We will never fully recover this economy so that we can have the capital that is necessary out there, so that Americans can be able to pay for these exorbitant gas prices, so that small business owners can expand their business. So I think that now is the time to do exactly what you're talking about. Look at fundamental tax code reform, so that we can eliminate things such as the death tax. We can eliminate things such as the dividends tax, which a lot of the seniors that I represent down in South Florida and pre-seniors, they depend upon those dividends. Why are we having these exorbitant taxes upon tax? So I think that this is a great opportunity to have this conversation, and I'm so honored that you allow me to stand here and spend some time with you this evening.
Well, very good. I hope the gentleman will stick around. We'll go through, I've got a few points I want to make, but at any point you feel like you want to expand upon something, please feel free to join back in. We often hear the saying that there's nothing in this world that's certain except death and taxes. They're both unavoidable. I will tell you, as a practicing physician for 25 years back in Texas, sometimes death seems a little less complicated than our tax code. But again, I draw your attention to H.R. 1040. This is an optional flat tax bill that I have introduced this year and really for several Congresses now. It does have a number of co-sponsors. We are yet to get to ramming speed, as the gentleman pointed out, but I think this, with the additional emphasis that has been placed on fundamental tax reform by Simpson-Bowles Commission, by the Republican presidential debates, I think this is a debate that the American people are anxious, in which they are anxious to participate. Now here's an interesting quote, and it's so interesting that I had a poster made of it. The tax system is so complicated that even the IRS Commissioner Doug Shulman has said, and I quote, "I find the tax code complex, so I use a preparer." Wow. The very guy who's in charge of the whole shindig cannot do his own taxes, so he has to hire it out. So if this learned individual, who is the IRS Commissioner, cannot figure out how to do his own income taxes without a preparer, how in the world is the average Joe supposed to be able to figure this out? And I ask that question because I've used this quote for a couple of years. And then last weekend in the Dallas Morning News, I was struck by this quote, an article where just a regular small businesswoman was interviewed about how she could possibly file her income taxes when she didn't understand it. And she told the Dallas Morning News reporter, "I don't care what the IRS says. It's complicated. It's much more confusing than I understand. We don't know what we're going to do." Now, I don't know what this says to you, but it certainly says to me, time for a change.
And you bring up the gentleman. And you bring up a great point, Representative Burgess. When you look at the fact that we have a tax code that is some 67,000 pages. As a matter of fact, the American people know that even some of our colleagues up here on Capitol Hill in this very body, the House of Representatives, have had some issues with the tax code. Also, to include our own Secretary of the Treasury has seemingly had some issues with the tax code and the confusing nature of which it exists. So you're right. I think it's an absolutely important time that we go back, we re-examine this tax code, maybe move away from this progressive tax code system and simplify it for the American people. And as you know, if we can bring those rates down, if we can lower the deductions, if we can get rid of a lot of the loopholes on the personal income tax side and also the corporate tax side, think about what we can do for generating economic growth here in America.
I think the result would be absolutely outstanding, and One of my wishes is that I live long enough to see that glorious day when the chains are taken off the American economy, the chains imposed by the tax code. I actually wasn't going to bring up some of our esteemed heads of federal agencies, even the esteemed heads of congressional committees last year, charged with writing the laws that govern what other Americans are having to pay in their taxes, and these individuals simply could not comply because it was too complicated. The very individual who was in charge of the committee with writing the tax laws found himself afoul of those same laws. The very head of the federal treasury, of the U.S. Department of Treasury, found himself afoul of some of the tax code because, again, he alleged the complexity in the system. So the tax code has grown by so much since it was introduced some 99 years ago. When it was first created that infamous year, the tax code comprised a total of 400 pages. As the gentleman from Florida just mentioned, it has grown to almost 70,000 pages. Remember, one of the fundamental tenets of the American legal system, including the tax system, is that, and I quote, "ignorance of the law is no excuse," close quote. Therefore, theoretically, every single American who is merely trying to comply with the law and get their taxes filed by April 17th this year is required to be familiar with 70,000 pages of tax rules. Now, I don't do my own taxes. I don't trust myself to do my own taxes. I know I'm not smart enough. With 4 college degrees, I couldn't possibly handle this. But I doubt that even the tax attorney that I employ at great expense is familiar with all 70,000 pages, let alone the single mom back in Dallas, Texas that I referenced. The complexity of the tax code is a consequence of countless deductions and exemptions aimed at steering a social agenda. It might surprise some people. The tax code is used to steer a social agenda, but it's supposed to be a tax code. So what does that mean? It means that the special interests are running rampant in the code. Anytime Congress wants to punish or reward, we call it incent behavior, we add either a credit or a tax to the IRS code. An example of this would be the, say, 23 new taxes that were included in the Affordable Care Act. Let me pause for just a minute. I get a lot of criticism from people who say, "You're a doctor, you should have been for health care reform." But the bill that was signed by the President 2 years ago this March was not a health care bill. It was a tax bill. Now, how do I know that? I know that because, of course, the House passed its own bill on health reform, but the Senate, when the Senate passed a bill on health reform, it wasn't the bill the House had worked on. It was not H.R. 3200. H.R. 3200 passed in this House November 9 of 2009, and it immediately went to the dustbin of history. The bill that ultimately became the Affordable Care Act was called H.R. 3590, and it passed the Senate famously on Christmas Eve. Oh, wait a minute. It was a Senate. Why was it a House bill number? Interestingly, H.R. 3590 started life as a housing bill, a bill to deal with veterans housing. It passed this House in July of 2009. I think I voted against it. I honestly don't remember. But H.R. 3590 had not one word about health care. It had not one word about taxes. It goes over to the Senate, sits in the hopper, gets picked up by the Senate Majority Leader when he bill, so it had to originate in the House of Representatives. So here's a convenient bill number, H.R. 3590. Amend it, strip all the housing language out of it, and then you start putting the health care language in it. That's how we got a health care bill that is really a tax bill passed initially by the Senate and then subsequently ratified by the House in March of 2010. It was a dreadful process, and for anyone who remembers those days, it was certainly some pretty dark dealing from the bottom of the deck, but that's why the health care bill has been so unpopular. It was unpopular when it passed, and it stays unpopular to this day, and I hope that we are going to be able to get something done about it, if not this year, then next. But back to the tax code. 23 new taxes in the Affordable Care Act because, again, Congress wants to punish their enemies or reward their friends. Well, how do you figure special interests like ethanol and the special treatment they get in the tax code? The result of these actions is a complication of laws fraught with opportunities for, yes, avoiding taxes, but also perhaps just simply making a mistake or not understanding all of the loopholes. And all of this then comes down to the expense of fellow Americans. Now, everyone's familiar with the problems of the tax code. We all criticize it. It's almost like an American pastime to do that. But here are some interesting facts that further demonstrate why we need fundamental tax reform. Let me go through a couple of items on...
And if I can, my colleague.
Yes, yield to the gentleman from Florida.
I'd like to talk about one of the things you just mentioned, how we are using the tax code as a weapon for behavior modification. You just brought up exactly one of the things we have to be very concerned about is all of the new taxes that will kick in the Patient Protection of Affordable Care Act from January 2013 out to January of 2018. One of those taxes even includes a real estate transaction tax. Yes. Now, why would we tax people for going out and selling homes and purchasing homes? Those are the type of hidden things that you find in that bill. And that's why we need to come back and simplify this tax code so that we don't have politicians using it for a certain ideological agenda. But there's another unintended consequence that I see occurring down in our district because of this very complicated tax code. Now you have many different shady type of operators out there that are talking about how they will help prepare that tax code. You know, when you drive by and you see the person spinning the arrow or dressed up like the Liberty Bell or something of that nature. And now we're finding that many of these places are rampant with tax fraud, that people are not getting their tax returns back. Now think about, just as you have recommended, a simplified tax code. Think about what is happening with tax fraud that is targeting our seniors, so that now you have people that are going trying to file their tax form and they're finding out that someone has already done it under their presumed identity. If we could simplify this, a lot of those unintended consequences would not be happening.
That's absolutely correct. Here's a few fun facts that I've compiled over the years on the income tax code. Each year, America spends 6.1 billion hours preparing their tax form. Turns out that's 254 million days. Who knew? The cost of compliance for federal taxpayers filling out the returns and related chores was $163 billion in 2008. That's 11% of all income tax receipts. Think about that just for a moment. We could have an 11% increase in revenue to the federal treasury if these costs were not incurred. The tax code has grown so long that it's become challenging even to figure out how long it is. A search of the tax code in 2010 turned up 3.8 million words. A 2001 study published by the Joint Commission on Taxation put the number at 1.3 million words. A 2005 report that the number of words had almost tripled since 1975, such as the pace, the rate at which new regulations are being added. A study done in 1998, when the forms were even less complicated, was surveyed by 46 tax experts. They kind of ran some hypothetical numbers on a hypothetical earning, and each expert came up with 46 different answers from 46 tax experts when determining tax liability. The calculations range from a low of $34,000 to a high of $68,000. The one who directed the test even stated that his computation is not the only possible correct answer. And yet, we are asking our fellow Americans, our fellow citizens, to make this same type of leap of faith every year when they fill out these forms. They don't want to be non-tax compliant. They don't want to be perhaps afoul of the law. But the problem is it is so complicated that they literally have no choice.
You know, one of the pieces of legislation that we are currently considering is how do we spur on capital for our small businesses. Now think about what you are recommending, Dr. Burgess, where you look at the personal income tax rate, and right now we have this, you know, progressive tax code system. What if we were to flat tax that out, one single rate? Think what that would do for small businesses who operate from that personal income tax rate, subchapter S and LLCs. Think about the fact of, you know, how they're going from being at the top end, maybe 35, 38% of that bracket. Now we bring it down a little bit lower, like you suggest, in 1040. What happens with that capital now we put back in their pockets? What can they do with those small businesses? What can they do with providing the right type of benefits for their employees? What can they do to expand that business. That's why what you're bringing up is one of the critical things we have to look at if we are truly going to turn around the economic situation here in America.
Well, they might spend it on goods and services produced by other Americans, which would help their businesses, or they might reinvest it in their own business and perhaps hire a new person, even with the threat of the Health Care Act hanging over their heads. The Tax Foundation estimated in 2007 that the average person spends 79 days working to pay their federal taxes, another 41 days for their state and local taxes. To pay the federal taxes is more than people pay in health care, housing, and transportation. You can kind of see the return on investment for those other areas, but I'm not quite sure that people see the return on investment as they're forced to pay their federal income taxes. We all complain about paying taxes, but the fact is, if the system was fair and simple, it would be easier to take. Now, Americans don't mind paying for roads. They don't mind paying for a strong defense or for health care. But if the family who lives next door is paying a smaller share of the tax burden than you living right next door are forced to pay at a higher rate just because they have a better accountant, that simply doesn't make sense to people. The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal, and I believe that should apply to our tax code. Time is precious. All of us don't have enough time to do all of the things that are in our daily living. We've got to earn a living, raise our family, discipline our kids, spend time with friends, and then the dollars and cents side of the equation, where time is money and valuable resources are squandered navigating the tax laws instead of growing the economy and instead of creating jobs. Taken together, this is a strong prescription for real change in our tax code. And the good news is we know what works. We've seen it before. We caught a glimpse of it in 1986 when Ronald Reagan cut the code in half. As a result of that reform, the economy grew, revenues increased, jobs were created. I can't think of a better prescription for our economy than replicating the reform of the tax code on an even greater scale. So what to do? To me, the prescription is very simple. Flatten the tax, broaden the base, shift the burden away from families and small businesses, simplify the tax code, and make it easier for businesses and families to use. Now, even the National Taxpayer Advocate, Nina Olson, repeatedly states that simplify the tax code as one of her recommendations to her annual report to Congress. In 2009, she was quoted as saying the complexity of the code leads to perverse results. On one hand, taxpayers who honestly seek to comply with the law can make inadvertent errors, causing them to either overpay their tax or to become the subject of an IRS enforcement action for mistaken payments of tax. On the other hand, sophisticated taxpayers often find loopholes that enable them to reduce or eliminate their tax liabilities. Now look, this is the National Taxpayer Advocate, and she thinks it's best for our constituents if we simplify the system. So it makes sense for members of Congress to take up that sentiment and work toward that goal. And Mr. West, I can assure you, your constituents and my constituents already know that.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, our constituents back in South Florida, and of course we get a lot of email from all across the country, and hopefully we'll get some of that email tomorrow after this special order. But they understand a single flat rate. All flat tax proposals have a single rate, and usually that single rate is less than 20%. That low flat rate solves the problem of a high marginal tax rates by reducing those penalties against productive behavior such as work and risk-taking and entrepreneurship. And also, you eliminate a lot of those special preferences because flat tax proposals would eliminate provisions of the tax code that bestow preferential tax treatment on certain behaviors and activities. And guess what? It reduces that influence of lobbyists up here that you already talked about. When you get rid of deductions or lower those deductions, credits and exemptions and other loopholes, that also helps to solve the problem of complexity, allowing taxpayers to file their tax returns on that one simple form. That's why H.R. 1040 is a great step forward.
Well, just a few years ago, a group called American Solutions conducted a nationwide poll on different topics relating to the tax code and on taxes and jobs. They crossed gender, ethnicity, economic, and party lines and discovered the following interesting facts about America. The majority of people in America, 69% to 27%, think the American tax system is unfair. A majority believe that the death tax should be abolished, 65%. A majority favor tax incentives for companies who keep their headquarters in the United States of America, 70 to 26. Taxpayers should be given the option of a single income tax rate of 17%. Taxpayers would still have the option of filing their taxes in the current system if they chose to do so. That was a 61% favorable. And the option of a single rate system should give taxpayers the convenience of filing their taxes on a single sheet of paper. Guess what? That one was 82%. 82% of our constituents, our fellow Americans, believe they should be able to file their federal income taxes on a single sheet of paper. America has spoken, the evidence is clear, and we need a real change in our tax system. The encouraging news is that we do have a practical and effective blueprint for making this change across the board. The blueprint, of course, is the flat tax. In 1981, Robert Hall, Alvin Rabushka proposed a new and radically simple structure that would transform the Internal Revenue Service and our economy by creating a single rate of taxation for all Americans. Today, several states with their state income taxes have implemented single rate tax structures for their state income taxes. From Utah to Massachusetts, citizens are seeing the benefit. In Colorado, a single tax rate generated so much income that the revenue that lawmakers were actually able to reduce rates. In Indiana, the economy boomed after a single rate went into effect in 2003, and the following 3 years, the corporate tax receipts rose by 250%. Here in Congress, there's no shortage of champions who've worked on the problem. I've been involved in this in a number of years, but prior to my coming here, Congressman David Dreyer of California, the chairman of the Rules Committee, has spent a number of years working on this concept. Paul Ryan, our budget chairman, Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, chairman of the Budget Committee, has worked on this problem for a long time. Mike Pence of Indiana, who was our conference chair last term, of course, my friend Alan West of Florida, all working to establish a simple tax rate structure for our country. Other members are working on this in the Senate as well. And let's be honest, this is a time where Congress is not held in high regard. And this would be a tremendous deliverable for the House and the Senate to work together on simplifying the tax code and actually returning not just dollars to the American people, but giving them back their time that we rob from them every year when we enforce compliance in the tax code. Not everyone may agree on precisely where the flat tax rate should be. 17% no deductions is something that's been talked about for some time, and I think that is certainly a system that is worthy of study. But if someone else wants to talk about a system with 2 rates or 3 rates, if they want to maintain deductions, we should be able to have that debate. We should have it civilly. It shouldn't be something that we clobber each other over the head about. But every American should bear this burden equally at the lowest rate possible. And everyone should be able to do their taxes without the help of a professional. And people should be confident that when you earn the same income as the person across the street, you pay the same income taxes at the end of that year. Just by way of comparison, according to the Internal Revenue Service, there are 1.2 million tax professionals preparing tax during the tax season, which is roughly equal to the population of the state of Hawaii. There are 950,000 doctors in the United States. Now, as a physician, I think that this number is off. It's askew. Healers should not be outnumbered by tax preparers. It makes no sense. More people should go into medicine and less into tax preparation, and if we'll provide them the simplicity in the tax code, perhaps that can happen. But let's also be honest. The accountants who do your taxes would much rather be talking to you about your long-term life planning, your planning for your retirement, your planning for covering expenses if you become disabled. They would much rather talk to you about life planning than they would talk to you about how they disrupt your life with the tax code. I yield to the gentleman from Florida.
And thank you once again, dear colleague, because you bring up a great point when you talk about planning for your after years, your retirement years. But I think another thing we need to be considering is how do we spur on investment in the United States of America? How can we spur on innovation and ingenuity? And when you look at the flat tax, then you can get rid of double taxation of savings and investment, because flat tax proposals would eliminate the tax code bias against capital formation by ending the double taxation of income that is saved and invested. This means that we get rid of the death tax. We can get rid of capital gains tax. Definitely we can reduce it. And most importantly, we get rid of the double tax on dividends. And by taxing income only one time, a flat tax is far easier to enforce and more conducive to the one thing that we need in the United States of America right now, job creation and capital formation. It's all about having the right type of tax policies that emanate out of this body, the House of Representatives, and that's why we have to get behind your proposal.
Well, according to H&R Block, which is one of the major preparers of income taxes in this country, now 60% of Americans use some type of preparer for their income tax return, and quite likely that number is going to increase. In 1960, less than a fifth of taxpayers used paid preparers. In 2011, H&R Block garnered $3 billion in tax preparation revenue, up from $1.5 billion, so they doubled in the previous 10 years. I got nothing against this company. I think they do a good job. I've got nothing against my own accountant. But it's an indictment of our system when a tax preparer has seen their revenues increase so much. And it really is a shame. The United States Congress has it within their power to change this, to transform this, and they simply will not do it. And instead, they continue to create a system that is so complicated that more than half of the public feel the need to pay someone else just what they owe at the end of the year to Uncle Sam. I'll tell you, it just simply does not have to be this complicated. Let me show you what is possible if we were to transform the system into a simple single-rate tax. Here is the form. This is not the long form, it's not the short form. It is just simply the tax form. And maybe someone at home should time me, but here you go. Write in your name, a little bit of identification data, your income, a line for personal exemptions, calculate your deductions from your personal exemptions, your taxable income, and calculate your tax by multiplying by a flat rate, subtract the taxes already withheld, and you're done. So what did that take? 30 seconds? A minute if you write slow? This is not a complicated formula. This is not a complicated scheme, and most people would be able to do this themselves without a lot of outside work or outside preparation. So, no more tax preparation bills, no more tax attorney bills. Gone are the hours of stressful research trying to figure out things like how your marital status will affect your return or how many children affect your return. No more headaches in trying to determine where the estimated tax payments go. No more Congress picking one group over another just because they've got a clever lobbyist to advocate on their behalf. Instead, we just deliver a simple system to the American people. Now, as you have said, the single rate structure would eliminate the taxes on capital gains, taxes on dividends, taxes on savings. Those things should only be taxed one time and done. Personal savings would increase. I will never forget the time I thought during the prior recession in this country, in Texas, the savings and loan debacle meltdown, I was in a solo practice. And I got worried at one point that I was not going to be able to meet my obligations. And as we emerged from that and cash flow picked up a little bit, I thought, you know, I am going to keep money in certificates of deposit enough to cover 3 months of operating expenses, so I'll never again have to worry about the dire wolf being at the door. And so I did that. And I kept that money there for a couple of years. What I found out by doing that maneuver, when that money eventually returned to the partnership and was distributed to the partners, we had paid corporate taxes on it at 38%, and then we paid personal income taxes at 39.6% because we were all doing pretty well by that time. Needless to say, my partners were not amused by the fact that I had conjured up a scheme that I thought would save us from ruin and, in fact, exposed us to double taxation under the IRS code. I know the gentleman from Florida wanted to say something.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And when you think about last year, our GDP growth over the 4 quarters of about 0.4%, 1.0%, 1.3%, and the revised number in the last quarter was 3%. That's why, once again, economists will tell you that the two principal arguments for a flat tax, growth and fairness, what you just brought out. They are attracted to this idea because the current tax system, with exorbitantly high rates and discriminatory taxation on savings and investment, it reduces growth, it destroys jobs, and it lowers incomes. A flat tax would not eliminate the damaging impact of taxes altogether, but by dramatically lowering rates and ending the tax code's bias against savings and investment, it will boost our economy's performance, especially when compared to the present tax code. And I think, Dr. Burgess, my dear colleague, if you look where flat taxes have been instituted, you have seen GDP growth in those countries. So what holds us back from doing something that is just